I've actually worked in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and I'm familiar with that part of the state. And when I was in the FBI, I was in Buffalo, New York for a period of time, and actually had some assignments in Erie, Pennsylvania, so I know that part of the state. So I do recognize the name of the congressman that no one knew from a place that no one ever heard of. So, but please welcome us today, Secretary Tom Bridge.
Actually, some reporter from a Philadelphia newspaper thought that was, wrote that article, used that whole description the day after I announced. I announced like 2 years in advance because I had probably 99% name identification in my congressional district and 1% name identification in the other district. So we actually served me pretty well. Every once in a while, though, you'll see something that's meant maybe comedic, maybe to give you a little juke, but you know, be the congressman that nobody ever heard of from the community nobody's ever been to, we did okay. So anyhow, delighted to be invited to the Bully Pulpit Luncheon Series. I like the Bully Pulpit, as Teddy Roosevelt and others done. I appreciate very much the work of RiponSociety. Strong believer in your mission and the civil public discourse of not only problems or solutions that we try to bring to a political community that seems to be getting further and further away from a civil, thoughtful, rational public discourse, looking for common ground and solutions. So I'm happy to be here. Very, very happy to be here. They asked me to just focus in on from 9/11 to the Anthrax attacks, which are still pretty much seared into my memory because like everybody else, I knew where I was on 9/11. I was in a garden in my home in Erie, Pennsylvania. I then took a couple of jelly donuts down to my mother who was hospitalized. That's the reason I was home that Monday. And I figured I was going to go back, do a little more gardening. It was a hobby of mine in my home. And then later on that morning, fly back to Harrisburg, our state capital. Well, we don't know what happened. By the time the state police alerted me to what had transpired, the first 2 planes that hit, I turn on NBC. I'm talking to my chief of staff. We were getting by then nobody knew what was happening, but it wasn't an accident. We knew there was something going on. So I called, we set up the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, called everybody in. And while I'm talking to my chief of staff and I'm watching the TV, Jim Michalczewski at NBC News is giving his report. I mean, there's really not much to report other than nobody knew what was going on. And in the middle of his report, said, you're going to have to excuse me, I just heard a loud crash on the other side of the Pentagon. I'm going to go over and investigate. With that, obviously, we were trying to make arrangements to get back to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. But by 9 o'clock or 9:10, very appropriately, President Bush and Secretary of Transportation Mineta, there were probably 3,900 to 4,000 commercial and private aircraft in the air. They were grounded, very appropriate gesture. And it took me like 2 hours to get clearance to travel from my home in Erie, Pennsylvania to the state capitol when a small state police helicopter got there, saw we had everything in order. We were in contact with all the regional emergency management authorities. Bingo, hopped on an old Chinook. Maybe you probably know the old Army helicopter, big war horse, big cargo supply. Rode many of them when I was in the service, excuse me, and made my way to Shanksville. It's just a beautiful little community, 245 people. They have a VFW, they got a country store, they got a volunteer fire department, and this is a place, it's the Norman Rockwell. And this is where they got the flag out on the patio. This is where volunteers do just about everything in the community, couple churches, and that's about it. And if any of you know the big Chinook, back opens. That's how they get all the cargo in and out. So I'm coming into Shanksville, Pennsylvania. I'm looking to see a debris field. I'm looking to see, because like many of you, the only exposure to commercial aviation accident was through TV. So parts of the fuselage, parts of the wing, parts of the engine. Folks, there's nothing except a smoldering hole. So we get down and we hold the press conferences, and what we had to do is the America tried to grapple with its emotions, tried to grapple in a rational way, who could possibly accept as part of their creed, their belief system, that whatever cause it was, we didn't know the cause at the time, could willingly, part of my chronological malice aforethought, just kind of drive commercial airliners into buildings, and for what cause would I mean, we certainly can't think of any cause that justifies a murder of that magnitude. But I mean, so the country's grappling with what transpires on September 11th. We all were. I mean, to a certain extent, I think we still are. I must say, let's not try to rationalize with those who accept this belief system as their mantra or their justification, because we can't, ladies and gentlemen, so don't try. Don't think of it in Western terms. I know it's difficult to think that, might be more difficult to say it, but I think we better understand it. Not that we're going to be breathless about the threat, but we cannot rationalize how they think in the terms of our experience, political, religious. We just can't do that. So we're wrestling as a country, and still to a certain extent do, and Mrs. Bush, the ever-gracious, wonderful woman, comes up on September 17th, is this marvelous, just an incredible memorial service, and on September 18th, the president gave me a call. I remember actually in the afternoon, I think Andy Card said, I want to talk to you, the president's going to call you, and I'm going to let you know, give you kind of an overview of what he's going to call you about. And Vice President Cheney got on the phone, and between the two of them, they said the president has this idea he'd like to explore with you, and we want you to keep an open mind to hear from the president. Well, they didn't need to tell me that. Obviously, I would do that, but they were kind enough to give me the heads up, and I had to ask them to call me later because I had to go to a funeral of a friend of mine, and when I got back, I talked to the president, and the rest is history. And then I came back down to Washington the next day, was down here on governor's business, went into the White House, there I saw the president, the vice president, Andy Card. What do you say when the president says, I need your help? I want to create a special office within the White House. And he talked to me the night before, and he knew I loved being gov. I mean, I'm telling you, Charlie did. I love Congress, but I love it. And particularly in a state that gives you a tremendous amount of authority, therefore a lot of responsibility, therefore you can actually get things done. It's a universe you can put your arms around. And he and I talked about the education reform. I was working on some other things, but once he kind of laid out the ground rules for me, it was only one answer you could do the President of the United States. That's yes, Mr. President. We'll worry about time frame later. I asked for a month. He said, you get 2 weeks. I remember I asked initially Andy Card that day, how many people are you going to give me? He said, I don't know, we'll start. I mean, there's no blueprint for this, Tom. I mean, well, we'll start with maybe 15 or 20. And I remember when I exited the president, I said, well, but Andy said, I'll be flexible. And I said, Mr. President, there's a man who has the best definition of flexibility. He initially started at 15 to 20. I'm leaving you with 180,000. So that's what we were Of course, at the time, we weren't thinking about creating a Department of Homeland Security. That was the furthest thing from our mind. So, as Charlie pointed out, I left the first week of October, got sworn in on October 5th, I believe. But it was interesting. On October 2nd, which is a Friday, it's my last day on the job. I had a lot going on. I wanted to wrap it up. That's why I wanted a month. So the president said 2 weeks. 2 weeks is it. But in my research for the book that I wrote, Test of Our Times, I learned that that afternoon, or that morning on October 2nd, in the Roosevelt room, the president, the vice president, John Ashcroft, Bob Mueller, Condi Rice, and a variety of other people were talking about other kinds of threats in the aftermath of 9/11. They were focusing on biological and chemical as well. I think it was on that day they also learned that a newspaper man from the Florida Sun, I think his name was Stevens, was hospitalized, and they thought it was inhalation anthrax. And so, as somebody from the Guardian wrote, English newspaper wrote, if something like paraphrase it, if 9/11 disrupted the psyche of America, the Anthrax attack on top of that mangled the psyche of America. The fact of the matter is, you're still trying to, 9/11, the horror, the pain, the visuals. I mean, everybody, when you remember the visuals, you close your eyes and see them. Then all of a sudden you got Anthrax, and is it a criminal event? Is it part of the overall terrorist attack? And we start scrambling immediately to deal with that.